Maduro's statement came as a response to a comment made by U.S. President Donald Trump earlier in the day, where he indicated his openness to engaging in discussions with the Venezuelan leader. At some point, Maduro, known for his steadfast stance on sovereignty and diplomacy, seized this moment to clarify his government's position, asserting that Venezuela has always been open to talks, provided they are held directly and without preconditions. In his address, Maduro conveyed that Venezuela would remain resolute in its pursuit of peace. He emphasized, "This country is at peace and will continue to be at peace." The Venezuelan leader's choice of words was not incidental. It was a direct message to both his domestic audience and the international community that his government seeks to avoid further escalation. And in the United States, whoever wants to talk to Venezuela will talk face to face without any problem, he continued. This statement was not just a reaffirmation of Maduro's earlier comments, but also a reminder of the government's broader diplomatic philosophy. Venezuela has long maintained that diplomacy is the only path to resolving international tensions, regardless of the adversaries involved. This sentiment was particularly pronounced in the context of Venezuela's strained relations with the United States. For Maduro, face-to-face dialogue is essential, even if there are major disagreements between the two governments. It's a position that contrasts sharply with the more confrontational stance that has been the hallmark of U.S. policy toward Venezuela under the Trump administration. Maduro's call for dialogue must be understood against the backdrop of the deteriorating relationship between Venezuela and the United States. Over the past several years, tensions have steadily escalated, particularly under the Trump administration. The U.S. has imposed a series of sanctions on Venezuela, targeting its economy, oil exports, and key figures in the government. These sanctions were designed to pressure Maduro into stepping down from power and to address what the U.S. claims are human rights abuses, corruption, and the suppression of political opposition. However, these measures have had devastating effects on the Venezuelan economy and have only entrenched Maduro's power, giving him a narrative of victimhood that resonates with many Venezuelans who view the sanctions as an external attack on their sovereignty. The decision to initiate these sanctions marked a pivotal moment in U.S. Venezuela relations, but it also highlighted a growing rift between the two nations that has only deepened over time. The U.S. has accused Venezuela of being a rogue state and has supported opposition figures within the country, notably Juan Guaidó, who declared himself interim president in 2019 with the backing of the U.S. and several European and Latin American countries. Despite these efforts, Maduro has remained firmly entrenched in power, supported by key allies such as Russia, China, and Iran. Maduro's invitation to Trump for direct talks, which he issued in a letter in September 2025, was an attempt to break the diplomatic deadlock. The Venezuelan president had hoped that Trump would agree to a meeting that would focus on de-escalating tensions and potentially finding common ground on issues of mutual interest, such as drug trafficking, regional security, and humanitarian aid. However, this proposal was immediately rejected by Washington, which dismissed the invitation as a ploy to gain international legitimacy. The U.S. also criticized Maduro for his role in what it claims are drug trafficking operations emanating from Venezuela, an accusation that Maduro strongly denies, calling it part of a broader campaign to delegitimize his government. Maduro's offer for dialogue, though rejected at the time, was a significant political gesture. It demonstrated his willingness to engage with the U.S. on equal footing, despite the complex and often antagonistic history between the two nations. Maduro's belief in the power of diplomacy over military confrontation is rooted in a long-standing tradition within Venezuelan foreign policy, which prioritizes sovereignty, peace, and non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries. For Venezuela, dialogue has always been viewed as a means to avoid foreign intervention, which has historically been a major concern for the country, especially given the U.S.'s history of intervention in Latin America. It's also important to contextualize Maduro's statements within the broader geopolitical landscape Venezuela. under Maduro's leadership, has consistently sought to distance itself from U.S. influence and to strengthen ties with other global powers, particularly Russia and China. These alliances have helped Venezuela weather the storm of economic sanctions, but they have also contributed to its growing isolation in the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela's alliances with countries like Russia, which has provided military support, and China, which has invested heavily in the Venezuelan economy, have been a significant factor in the country's resilience. However, despite these alliances, the reality on the ground in Venezuela remains difficult. The country has been grappling with severe economic challenges, including hyperinflation, widespread poverty, and a deteriorating healthcare system. The Venezuelan people have borne the brunt of these issues, with millions fleeing the country in search of better opportunities abroad. This migration crisis has become a significant regional challenge, with neighboring countries such as Colombia, Brazil, and Ecuador struggling to accommodate the influx of Venezuelan refugees. In this context, Maduro's call for direct talks with Trump takes on even more significance. By advocating for face-to-face diplomacy, Maduro is signaling a willingness to find a way forward that does not rely solely on military confrontations or economic sanctions. He is attempting to present himself as a leader committed to peace and stability, even as his government faces immense internal and external pressure. On the U.S. side, Trump's response to this invitation has been more cautious. While he has expressed a willingness to meet with Maduro, he has also maintained that certain conditions must be met first. The U.S. has repeatedly called for Maduro to step down and for free and fair elections to be held in Venezuela. These conditions, however, are unlikely to be met anytime soon, as Maduro remains firmly in power and continues to hold the support of key sectors of Venezuelan society and the military. The ongoing tension between the U.S. and Venezuela has been further exacerbated by recent military operations in the Caribbean and Pacific. Since September 2025, the U.S. has carried out approximately 20 attacks on vessels operating in these regions, which the U.S. claims were involved in drug trafficking. Maduro's government has strongly denounced these attacks, calling them extrajudicial executions and accusing the U.S. of violating international law. The Venezuelan government has called for an immediate cessation of these operations, which it views as an aggressive infringement on its sovereignty. For Maduro, the recent military activity in the region has reinforced his belief that the U.S. is seeking to destabilize Venezuela. He has framed these operations as part of a broader U.S. strategy to undermine his government and sow chaos in the region. In his November 17th address, he reiterated his government's position that diplomatic engagement is the only way to resolve these issues. He stressed that the use of force will only lead to further suffering, not peace. This message was particularly directed at the Trump administration, which has maintained a heavy military presence in the region. The call for dialogue is not only a political move, but also a strategic one. By publicly inviting Trump to engage in direct talks, Maduro is trying to portray himself as the more reasonable party in the ongoing conflict. He is seeking to gain international sympathy and to counter the narrative that he is an isolated authoritarian leader. In this sense, the call for diplomacy is also a way for Maduro to shore up his legitimacy, both domestically and internationally. As the situation develops, the world will be watching closely to see whether the U.S. will take Maduro's offer seriously or continue to pursue its policy of maximum pressure. While Trump has expressed a willingness to engage with Maduro, it remains unclear what terms he would be willing to accept for such talks to take place. The future of U.S.-Venezuela relations remains uncertain, but Maduro's call for dialogue represents a significant shift in the rhetoric between the two countries. Maduro's message is clear. Diplomacy, not confrontation, is the key to addressing the issues that divide Venezuela and the United States. Whether or not the U.S. will reciprocate remains an open question, but for now, Maduro's invitation to Trump remains an important moment in the ongoing saga of U.S.-Venezuela relations. As the world continues to watch this diplomatic drama unfold, the hope remains that dialogue will ultimately replace conflict and that both nations can find common ground on the issues that matter most.